Hey everyone, I'm Tyler Hall, Director of Customer Success at Electrona, and today we'll be discussing the customer success story of one of our Jamf MSP customers, AMLLC, and their journey growing from a small, nearly 50-person startup to an organization of over 1,400 employees in just 18 months. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to please use the chat function as we'll be responding live to questions. As I mentioned, I'm Tyler, and as Director of Customer Success, I work closely with our clients' IT and executive teams to bridge the company goals with IT and security strategy, help with desired business process improvements, and ultimately find ways to leverage new technology effectively. I get excited about all of those things if you can't tell, but also equally excited about good sushi and my 2-year-old pug Oliver. But enough about me, let me introduce my much more interesting colleague, Justin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin, and I'm a Director of Technical Services here at Electrona. I'm excited to be here with you today as we walk through our one-to-many journey using Jamf. Along with my colleagues Tyler and Chad, we're here to share some insights on the many trials and successes we've had along the way. Now I'm going to pass it over to Chad so he can introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Chad, founder and CEO of Electrona. My team and I have been working with Apple Technologies for over a decade, providing managed services, delivering training courses, and consulting services for rapidly scaling companies. I'll pass it back to Tyler to go a bit in detail over our services and offerings.
Thanks, Chad. To set the stage, let me share a little about our company history and our offering. We're a Jamf services partner and have been delivering customer onboarding engagements as well as other professional services to IT teams on Apple device management workflows since 2015. Today, we'll be focusing on our MSP offering, or Electrona infrastructure as we like to call it. As a Jamf MSP, we provide managed services for a variety of industries across the US and the world. These services start with the management of devices using Jamf Pro, Jamf Protect, and Jamf Connect as appropriate, but also include everything an internal IT department would provide an organization. We'll talk more on that later. So if you're not a service provider, I'm certain some of the lessons learned today will be applicable to your internal IT team as well. In addition, we'd encourage you to check out our website and visit our JNUC landing page at electrona.com/JNUC2022, where you can look into some of our tools for IT teams like Electrona Patch and Migrator. You should also check out our colleague Ryan's patch management panel this week for some more information on those tools. I'll now hand it over to Justin to discuss our client's request and how we assisted them in scaling up rapidly over the past 2 years.
Hey again. Today I'll be walking you through how we work with a rapidly scaling health startup poised to take on the many challenges of COVID-19 throughout the US. Our task required some creative thinking to aid on with the onboarding of over 100 employees per week at its peak. Let's dive in to explain a little more about how we did this. We had some challenges with our existing workflows. Our usual approach had previously been to ship computers to our clients' offices and have them go through an automated enrollment or zero-touch configuration. For a variety of reasons, this wasn't going to work in this new environment of delayed procurement and remote work in mid-2020. Let's start with our zero-touch deployment issue. With distributed teams across the US and then operating in multiple remote locations, internet connectivity presented itself as a barrier to successful automated deployment. For example, users in Alaska would find themselves limited by DSL or other low bandwidth connections. We tackled this by setting up an internal depot operation where we could take new machines out of the box, perform the enrollment process, and drop ship to employees fully configured. Our Jamf Pro policies would then guide the user through finishing steps such as resetting their password and system preferences and by listening for the known temporary password. Moving on to reprovisioning. Let's talk about reprovisioning and the reissuing of machines. High staff turnover through multiple projects meant existing inventory needed to be repurposed and quickly without hands-on IT assistance. We're able to meet this challenge by creating a reissue Mac automated workflow. This tool enabled on-site staff to enter employee information to repurpose a Mac within minutes. This is made available via self-service and was scoped to necessary sites for ongoing use as needed. IT was no longer a stopgap for getting devices to the field as quickly as possible. This also helped us with some of our user account and identity management pieces, which Chad will talk in more detail about later. On to procurement delays. Supply chain constraints challenged every industry within the last year, especially ours. Shipping times extending 6 weeks became commonplace, and rapid hiring meant new computers were needed yesterday. Orders need to be placed weeks in advance to include spare inventory for new hires and repairs. Many of the K-12 sites require computers to be shipped on or by Friday for an employee starting on Monday. This was a departure from our standard procedure, requiring 2 weeks' notice in order for device procurement and other client sites. Our team of technicians were able to provision and ship dozens of computers in one day, completely configured and ready for use by the end user. Developing new workflows required us to pivot quickly to accommodate the new normal. Thanks, 2020. Now, let me pass it to my colleague Chad to explain some of the technical details and advantages of using Jamf Pro with Apple Silicon.
Thanks, Justin. So, as Justin mentioned, we had a number of issues with our kind of standard deployment process that we had in place prior to 2020. Intel Macs often took an hour or so to provision if we needed to install or update Mac OS, followed by the automated deployment. And unfortunately, we also run into some issues with battery life on those devices as well. But ultimately, the first thing that really came to mind, given that we were working with a client that had a lot of high rapid growth and trying to do so as efficiently as possible, they came to us saying, we want the lowest cost computer that we can purchase. And luckily, at that point in time, the lowest cost computer that you could purchase happened to be the fastest. As part of our initial provisioning process, Apple Configurator made this so much easier, reducing our reinstallation of Mac OS or update time, as well as automated enrollment to under 17 minutes per Mac, basically increasing our ability to deploy computers at a rate of over 4 times what we were able to do before. We're also now able to set up most Macs without having to ever connect them to power due to the greatly improved power efficiency. So this led to a lot of improvements to our deployment process using that depot that Justin spoke about earlier. In addition, as Justin mentioned, we often had very quick turnaround on new hires, and we had to do some thinking about how we were going to ensure that we had computers set up quickly, but also were able to personalize those for each individual user. We explored some tools that may have allowed us to do this using an identity provider like Jamf Connect. But the reality was many of our users, hadn't even gone through the process of setting up their email account or even getting set up with any sort of identity by the time that we were shipping a computer out to them. In addition, we had some policies and configuration profiles that needed to be scoped at the user level. So what we were able to do was we created a tool to allow users to set up their own user account on the computer to kind of personalize that after receiving the computer, or in some cases where we were setting up a generic local account with a known password to allow the user to simply set up their credentials once they receive the Mac. Shipping the computers for the users to enroll themselves just wasn't viable, as Justin mentioned earlier. So we wanted to make sure, in addition to that we had them all set up with all the apps and all of the settings that they needed for their first day. Now I'd like to show you one of the workflows we use to allow users to personalize their Mac in one of the situations where we had to ship computers without even knowing who was going to be using them on the first day. So let's take a look at that video now. So you'll see here, when we shipped the computer, it had just a generic user account with the company name. This allowed us to basically set up the computers without any identifiable information about the computer, and we set up each one of the host names just with the serial number of the Mac so that we could identify the ones that had not yet been issued to a user. We then created a personalization tool in Swift to allow our users to fill out their information, put in their first name, last name, position, and department that they were reporting under. And this would communicate to us back in IT what user was using the computer, as well as being able to personalize the Mac and reset the host name and the username on the computer to match the user that was using the computer. We did some validation here, as you can see, to verify that the email address that was entered matched their corporate email address, so that way we could properly link it up with the employee record. And we required completing all of the fields before completing using this tool. Once the user clicks the Assign to Me button, That then changes the display name on their username and also updates the name of the computer, and simultaneously submits an inventory update to Jamf Pro so that this information is up to date in inventory. We're now going to take a look and see how that was changed. So you can see now under users and groups, the generic company name account has been renamed with the user's account. The user has been given some feedback on their completion, as well as the host name being updated with the user's name. In addition, to make sure that we could ship a computer with the user account already provisioned on the device, and we were actually able to sort of fully automate our automated enrollment or DEP workflow, so that FileVault actually was enabled without any user interaction, where we basically created the user account with a known password, and that way the script that we have to enable FileVault 2 did not actually require any user input. The challenge here, of course, is to make sure that the end user updates their password from that known temporary password and sets it to one that is private to them. So we used a workflow to continue to notify the user in Notification Center using Yo, and we monitored for when the user updated this password using an extension attribute in Jamf that periodically checked to see if the user had changed the password from the known one to something that was private to them. And if the user didn't change their password, we could follow up with them and ensure that they completed that step. And we'll be sharing this script with you if you have a workflow that might be helpful, where you also have FileVault automatically enabled using a known password. I'll let Justin get to that in a little bit. A little bit more about optimizing our automated enrollment workflow. Basically, our workflow was that we would unbox the computer and tried to minimize the amount of information that had to be entered by a physical human, and also wanted to be able to get it back in the box as quickly as possible. As I mentioned, we were able to get this to under 17 minutes per Mac. So as such, we'd go through the setup assistant, create the account either for the generic user, or if we knew who the user was, we'd create that using that known temporary password. And then after setup assistant, all of the rest of the steps required no user input. So simply allowed all those apps to install, allowed it to set the dock, and then it would give a verification pop-up at the end, either saying everything was successful or some of our policies had failed, allowing the administrator to know, I need to go and fix this before I put it back in the box. At that point, we'd put it back in the shipping box that it came in, apply a label to ship it to the end user's home location, and we move on to the next one. Here's a little photo of one of our colleagues, Anthony, setting up multiple Macs. We had a few of us working from home doing this, as we weren't working from the office in the middle of 2020. But the ability to do this without power adapters, and the ability to do this kind of without a whole lot of user interaction allowed this process to be really seamless, and pretty pain-free. Really, the issues we were running into were primarily shipping related issues once we got these on the way to the end user. So let's talk a little bit about the results and how this all went. We started working with AM back when they had about 60 employees. At that point in time, they were sending users, out to the Apple Store, to Best Buy, to various retailers, and saying, just go purchase a Mac. We'll figure it out later. We'll get you all set up. And they had, a couple people internally assisting with cloud account creation, etc. So we had gotten a call and they said, hey, we've got some contracts with customers that are requiring us to have a bit more kind of serious security posture. And we'd like some help as we start to scale up. And we kind of figured, well, you're 50 or 60 employees, we're probably going to be growing you to a couple hundred. This will be exciting. It turns out that it was a lot more exciting. We got to a place where we were actually shipping over 100 Macs per week. And amazingly enough, on our service desk, we only have about 2 or 3 active employees working on our service desk at a given moment. And even with 100 Macs being shipped, to employees starting in the same week, we had very few support calls, given the fact that we were able to provide, management in the company some guidance around how the user should set up their computer, as well as, just having a lot of, guidance for the user actually on the Mac itself. So we sent the user a guide explaining how to use self-service. We also sent over, notifications to the user on a periodic basis, things like updating that temporary password, so that they would set up the user account and make sure that they've got their password changed to something that's private to them, as well as some basic instructions on just how to get signed into services and applications that you need to use on your first day. One of the challenges that we ran into is that staffing for temporary COVID-related healthcare positions during the middle of a pandemic, all working from home, was a fairly high turnover type of business. So we had some employees that started and obviously got set up on their Mac, had a great time, but we also had some that may have just changed their mind by the time that their first day rolled around. And we had a lot of computers also coming back to us at this point in time. So we'd be shipping, 100 out a week, and let's say, a couple handfuls of those are going to be coming back to us, and we need to be able to reissue those and not sort of acquire a pile of computers that are not being used. We want to be efficient, with our clients' inventory. So luckily, the process that we used to set up the computer from scratch when we got it, shipped from Apple directly originally, is the same process for us to, wipe and reissue computers for new users. The ability with Apple Silicon for us to rapidly reimage and reinstall macOS using Apple Configurator 2 allowed us to really not have to do anything specifically on the computer when it came back from the user who had decided, say, to not accept the position or had left for whatever reason. All we needed to do was make sure that the device was physically in good working order, make sure that, kind of all the accessories and stuff are properly in the box. But ultimately, after that, all we needed to do was start the process over from the beginning. So we connected it to the computer we were using for that restore operation with Apple Configurator 2. We plug it in, reinstall macOS. That erases everything on the Apple Silicon Mac. We don't have to, go through a, actual interactive reinstallation of macOS. And then we were able to proceed with automated enrollment starting from the beginning. And since we had our re-enrollment settings set appropriately in Jamf Pro, basically started out as if it was a completely new Mac. We were doing dozens of those per week. And the process was more or less, just as easy as the ones that were coming in new. So feedback was very high, in addition to, successfully getting all of these employees their computers, which obviously was, great feedback from the executive leadership saying, great, we have people that can actually work. We hired them, middle of last week, and now they're up and running. They've got a new Mac. They've got all the things that they need, and they can actually really get started performing their job duties right away. We also had over a 99% five-star satisfaction rating on all of our ticket requests that came in during this time as well. So, we were certainly a little apprehensive at the beginning as far as, how this might go. Previous to this, I don't think we had a single customer that was onboarding nearly as many staff in such a short period of time. And certainly with, procurement issues during that time period, we were very pleased that we had done appropriate planning and had gotten, enough computers into our depot to be able to fulfill all of these requests in a timely fashion. One of the largest, challenges that we had was that, during the winter time period in particular, there were some shipping delays and some issues at various warehouses. Luckily, our client was pretty understanding around this, and certainly these were some issues that were outside of our control. But it was really, kind of great for us to feel like, we've done, we've created a really great process and system here to be able to set up these computers in a short amount of time, and get everyone up and running really much more efficiently than we had in the past. And I'd say it's, definitely thanks to, some of the tooling that we were able to use, but also, the Apple Silicon hardware just made this much faster. And certainly the power efficiency was great so that we didn't have to worry about batteries draining as we're trying to set these computers up. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Justin to talk a little bit more about some of the feedback that we got from our customers, as well as providing some information to you all about how you can get access to some of the tools that we talked about, and also how you can get in touch with us if we can do anything to help you and your organization moving forward.
Thanks, Chad. As you can see, we had overwhelming support from leadership every step of the way of this process. They were very pleased with our reliability and innovation to ensure the core business could stay up and running in the right direction. And fortunately for us, we were actually able to take many of these lessons from this experience, and it presented new opportunities for us to expand our processes and automations to the other clients that we support. This also allowed our internal team to remain lean and also scale up to support thousands of customers all around the world as well. As Chad previously mentioned, today we like to share these open source tools with you regarding either the 5-vault automation and our automated enrollment workflow. And these are available today on our GitHub and can be found by going to the following URL, which is github.com/electrona. We've also set up, as Tyler mentioned earlier in the presentation, a special JNUC landing page with our website with additional resources and information for you, including this presentation. So you can visit that at electrona.com/JNUC2022 to get access to everything. We want to thank you guys again for joining us. Should you have any questions regarding our services, this presentation, or some of the tools that we presented today, please feel free to contact us either via our email, which is letstalk@electrona.com. Post your follow-up questions, of course, in the chat as well. We want to thank you again for joining, and please enjoy the rest of your JNUC. Take care.
Thanks so much.